Welcome to Uniquely Qualified. I'm your friend and host, Liz Ficken, and I'm so glad you're here. Uniquely Qualified is a podcast that empowers guests to share their experience, strength, and hope in overcoming challenges in the spirit of mutual healing. We hope that you'll leave feeling more aware, connected, and supported in navigating the human experience. Today's episode will contain content that discusses pregnancy, miscarriage, and pregnancy loss. Please take care of yourself and engage as it feels supportive. Before introducing today's guest, I want to make sure that we are all equipped with the correct terms and definitions in discussing our main topic, which is miscarriage. I want to make it clear that I am not a medical professional, mental health care provider, nor an expert on this subject. I am, however, using this platform to amplify the voices of people who have or are overcoming challenges, and in doing so, hope to help people be more aware, supported, and hopefully kind. This is a topic that touches all of us, whether we are aware of it or not. I hope that after listening today, you'll understand what miscarriage is, how to be a supportive friend to someone who has experienced miscarriage, and how you might access grief care if this is something you are going through right now. I also want to be clear that we are specifically discussing miscarriage as an event of 2 or less pregnancy losses in a row. We are not discussing textbook recurring miscarriage, which is 2 or more lost pregnancies in a row. We are also not offering up solutions for preventing miscarriage, but we are discussing one woman's experience, strength, and hope in going through this significant loss. We are also not discussing infertility. However, I do hope to have a future episode or two interviewing guests on topics such as infertility, IVF, and surrogacy. So, what is miscarriage? Miscarriage is defined as the sudden loss of a pregnancy before the 20th week. A pregnancy loss after 20 weeks is known as a stillbirth. The medical term for miscarriage is spontaneous abortion. Because sometimes women miscarry before they know they are pregnant, and it can be hard to quantify the incidence rates of miscarriage, many providers indicate that 1 in 4 clinical pregnancies, that is, pregnancies confirmed with a pregnancy test, end in miscarriage. Later in this podcast, we will unpack some primary research that I conducted via Instagram, but for now, let's all just keep that number 1 in 4 in mind. The term miscarriage might sound as if there was something amiss in the carrying of a pregnancy. That is rarely true. Although miscarriage is relatively common, it can be extremely traumatic and devastating. Some people blame themselves for miscarrying, but most of the time, miscarriage happens because of a random event that is no one's fault. On her podcast, As a Woman, Dr. Natalie Crawford discusses our topic in her episode titled Miscarriage and Loss. I encourage anyone who is looking for a medical perspective on this topic to listen to her episode, where she provides a clinical viewpoint as well as a discussion of her own story of recurring miscarriage. One statistic she shares is that if someone has a miscarriage, there is a 20 to 25% chance that there will be a second miscarriage. She also makes it clear that under medical supervision and with support, many families are able to receive care for the reasons they miscarry and eventually go on to have a healthy, happy baby. Dr. Crawford also highlights the fact that many people do not talk about their miscarriage experience and that this silence can exacerbate pain and suffering and lead to psychological and medical trauma. I'll have a link to this episode in show notes and on the podcast Instagram page so you can reference later. Thankfully, we live in a world where more and more people are speaking up about miscarriage, and academic institutions are conducting more research on the topic and its effects on individuals and their families. In June of 2024, the American Psychological Association published a piece by Charlotte Huff entitled The Hidden Grief of Miscarriage. Here's an excerpt that will set the table for introducing our guest. People coping with pregnancy loss often experience intense grief without the traditional rituals and other supports that accompany loss. For women and their partners coping with pregnancy loss, the sense of isolation can be acute and emotionally debilitating. Unlike with other losses, there are often no funerals or rituals to gather with loved ones as the bereaved parents strive to process the tumult of their emotions. Their feelings might range from shame and guilt that they somehow caused the miscarriage or stillbirth, to sadness over a future forever lost for their child and themselves. They must navigate a culture that's often phobic about crying and grief and might view the loss of a pregnancy as less significant than other types of death. Quote, the idea that continues to be pervasive to a degree is that the less time that you have spent with the developing baby, the less emotional attachment a person should have to it, and thus a shorter grieving period is needed, end quote. This was said by Dr. Bindeman, a former co-chair of the Committee of Reproductive Issues for the Society and Psychology of Women. Quote, and yet what people tend to not understand is that oftentimes a pregnancy is a realization of a dream that might have started in a person's childhood, end quote. Moreover, given that miscarriage can be difficult to distinguish from an abortion, the potential stakes for those who are grieving can extend beyond the emotional, following the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision and related state laws criminalizing abortion. Now people have to deal with the fear that you might be charged for crime, but it's a totally different ballpark. Along with coping with often disenfranchised grief, bereaved parents might also be suffering from reproductive trauma, said Agatha Friedel, PhD, an assistant professor in the counseling program at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and a counseling educator. Because we don't believe that children should die before their parents, it shakes our core beliefs or assumptions, she said. In research involving 227 women who had experienced miscarriage, Friedel looked at what coping strategies and resilience factors contributed to their post-traumatic growth, exploring the relationship between self-disclosure of the loss, positive social reactions, and rumination. Friedel and her research colleague found a correlation between self-disclosure and the positive social reactions that the women received in fostering their post-traumatic growth. Moreover, deliberative rumination, a cognitive process in which the individuals attempt to integrate the traumatic experience into their life narrative over time, mediated the relationship between positive social reactions and post-traumatic growth, according to the study's findings. I'm incredibly grateful that one of my dear friends has come forward and agreed to share her experience, strength, and hope on this topic, a topic that is very often not openly talked about, but as we just learned from the research, very important for the people experiencing miscarriage, as well as providing positive social interaction and post-traumatic growth for others who have experienced the same type of loss. My dear friend, Shannon Stark, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest of the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So let me just share a quick bio so our listeners can learn a little bit more about you. Shannon lives in Buckley, Washington with her husband, Taylor, daughter, Briar, and fur baby, Pitty Mix Banner. In her free time, Shannon enjoys connecting with friends, gardening, and working out at her local V Fitness studio. Shannon attended Hillsdale College, where she received her Bachelor of Arts in Marketing Management and obtained her Executive Master's in Business Administration from the University of Oregon in 2022. Shannon has built a successful career in the technology sector as an operations expert. So Shannon, you and I first met in 2020 through the University of Oregon's OE MBA program, and we've been friends ever since.
That's right.
I'm so glad to have you in my life.
Yes, thank you. I'm so thankful for you.
Oh, feeling is very mutual. And I just want to acknowledge for our listeners and for you, Shannon, that you've been a big supporter, maybe my number one supporter of my dream to create this podcast, because you heard my excitement in dedicating time to empowering and uplifting people. But you were also an inspiration to me because you were so open in sharing the heartache that you and your family experienced earlier this year. So do you mind, in your own words, sharing what are you uniquely qualified to talk about today?
Yes. After having 2 miscarriages back to back in 1 year, I am uniquely qualified to talk about miscarriage.
Thank you, Shannon. I know how hard this has been for you and your family, and I just so appreciate and applaud your willingness to share your story with me and our listeners. So before we get into talking about what has happened this year, let's take a little step back and talk about the love story that started this whole thing. Do you mind telling us how you met your husband?
Yes. I met my husband on a dating app. We are one of those. We
Love.
actually went to high school together.
Mm-hmm.
but did not kind of re-meet until the dating app. But the funny thing was, is I always had this gut feeling, kind of like mid-20s, that I had already met the person I was going to marry. And
Wow.
I was at brunch with my girlfriends, and I was like, I just feel like I've already met them. I just have to re-meet them or run into them or something. It was such a weird feeling, and they had that
Yeah.
response of like, who knows that? That's weird, you know? And it was totally right. It was totally right. A few years
Oh,
later, we met on Hinge, and it was, yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
oh, I love that. Um, so how did you know that he was the one?
Well, for your listeners that have never seen my husband, you would too know he was the one if you saw him. He's handsome and
He's pretty easy
friendly
on
and
the eyes.
kind. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, Taylor is someone that just has a zest for life and just
Mhm.
does it all the time, like literally 24 hours a day. As a type A overachiever, I look like an underachiever next to him, which is very strange experience for me. But yeah, just the most genuine, kind, loving, happy human I've ever met. And really was immediately like, I gotta lock this down because like if someone else finds this, they're gonna go after it. So like had to
Lock
grab
it
that quick.
down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
meet, and what year
definitely.
do you meet?
2018,
Okay, so you meet 2018, and when do you get engaged?
2020.
2020. Okay. And this was before we started our grad school program, right? Like you came in engaged?
No, we started in the fall.
Uh-huh.
Wait, I did. No, yeah, we started the fall of, I got engaged in January, and
Okay. Okay.
we started that September. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I had the order of
Yes.
events correct.
Yes.
And then you got married in July 2021
Correct.
in
Yeah,
between.
in
Mhm,
between the 2 years of our program.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we did a cohort style MBA for our listeners who don't know. So you pack it all in 2 years. And so Shannon was not only going through a pretty rigorous pace of grad school, but she was planning a wedding,
Yeah.
had the wedding between year one and year two.
Yes. Yeah. So I got to graduate as Shannon Stark, even though I started as Shannon Bernardi. So that was
That's
fun.
really cool. Yes.
Yeah.
And you got pregnant also while we were in grad school.
Yes.
Was that part of the plan? Did you plan on being pregnant at our graduation? How did
Yeah.
that all go down?
Yes, no. We had planned on getting married in between the 2 years, and then we decided to delay our honeymoon until after graduation so it could be like we're done with school. It feels like a whole weight off of our shoulders, and
Yes.
then we'll go and travel. We also were trying to, again, it feels like a million years ago, but this was COVID, and so
Right.
we didn't, 2020 was still, similar COVID times, that we didn't want to like plan an international trip and have it get
Mm-hmm.
canceled or something. So we wanted to wait until 2022. And in that same time, we were kind of like, okay, well, have been married for a year, we could start trying for a family. We just kind of wanted to have, grad school behind us and have our feet on solid ground. It just felt, pretty chaotic between starting grad school in COVID and then
Mm-hmm.
getting married. And that we just were like, let's take a breather.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, my idea was like, oh yeah, well, like maybe we'll get pregnant on our honeymoon. We'll have like a honeymoon baby,
Oh,
like
so
that was my
romantic.
mindset. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was the thing. But we basically were like, we won't prevent it. It's fine. I kind of knew like, as long as we don't get pregnant before X time, then I won't be like 9 months pregnant during the program. But I was kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, we weren't actively preventing it, but I was definitely more of the mindset of like, oh, we'll get pregnant on our honeymoon.
Mm-hmm.
And then lo and behold, March we got pregnant, and I had no idea. So other thing about our program is it is a global business program, and so we did travel internationally. And
Mm-hmm.
on that trip, I had no idea I was pregnant. When we came home from the trip, I was like, this jet lag is killing me. I mean, like I took multiple COVID tests. I was like, why am I so tired? I never have as much trouble coming home from Europe than
Yeah.
I usually have it
Yeah.
going there. And I just was dragging and I could not figure it out. And then I was like, oh, there's one test I haven't taken and it's not a COVID test.
Yeah.
So yeah, took a pregnancy test. Turns out I was pregnant that whole time in the global trip. And yeah, we were pregnant. It was a
That
surprise.
is wild. Yeah, surprise just happened
Yeah,
right away.
right
Uh,
away.
so you get pregnant and you end up having Briar December of 2022, right? Early December? No,
She was due December 8th, and she ends up being born November 27th. So
November. Okay.
she's a rotating Thanksgiving baby.
Yeah. A little turkey. I love her.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have Briar, normal, healthy pregnancy.
Yeah,
Um,
so my pregnancy was very easy. I mean, traveled internationally multiple times, traveled for work, like just I mean that baby was on a lot of planes. It was totally fine. I went to the gym the whole time. I mean, I had heartburn, but that's like the least amount of
yeah,
pain you could write home about.
sure.
The only thing was that week 38 I did get diagnosed with preeclampsia.
Hmm.
So I did end up having to I did my best to try and have a delivery, but we did end up having a C-section. So as far as like a complication with pregnancy, that is categorized as a pregnancy complication, but it is something that generally, it's very rare that it's that late in your pregnancy for it to be week 38. But I think very thankful it wasn't earlier because it's like a bed rest kind of thing, which is not a scenario
Yeah.
I would want to be in. So I was very thankful that it was that far into pregnancy. And basically it was like you need to just get induced and get this baby out. But
Hmm.
otherwise there were no pregnancy complications. Everything was great from the start, super, super easy, no problems.
And I'm recording an episode later this week about traumatic birth. Do you identify as having a traumatic birth too?
I wouldn't, but I would say that in my shoes, I could see how someone would be. I
Yeah.
had incredible care. The team was amazing. And kind of what you talked about with like sharing your story, talking through things, giving time to process, grieving. There were like not long periods of grieving, but like the nurses knew I wanted to have an unmedicated water birth, which is like as
Hmm.
far away from what I actually had. But during that process, the nurses would say, okay, like it was kind of like decision tree. We'll try this. Okay, that didn't work. We'll try this. And they gave me every option to close every door before I was like, all right, the only door left is C-section. And I mean, like even going into the C-section, the nurses like came into the hall and they each gave me a hug and they were like, I know this isn't what you
What?
wanted. I know you didn't want this. It's okay to grieve that you're not having the delivery that you want. You're just around the corner from your baby. So they really were like letting me be sad about the fact that like that's what I wanted. And it's not
Yeah.
something that I wanted that was like impossible. Like plenty of people have unmedicated water
Right.
births, you
Yeah.
know? So it's
Yeah.
not like I wanted the
Absolutely.
world, but it just wasn't going to work out for me. And so I think that like had I not had the care in the hospital that I had, I could easily be identified as one of those people, but I just had the greatest nurses ever that were like, can I hold your hand? Can we take a minute to grieve that we're closing this door? And I was like, yes, please.
Yeah.
I'd like a minute to cry about this. Okay, I'm ready now. I just was like, it was very nice. They let me process the whole way. I was in there for 3 days before we had her. So it was a lot of time for them to like just care for me in a really great way that was not medical. It's not a medical way of caring for someone. So I
Hmm.
don't identify in that way. I think just because of luckily the staff that I had around me.
Yeah, and it sounds like nobody was diminishing your experience and saying, "Well, at least blah 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 blah." They're
Yeah,
like
it
they're
was
like,
not
"This is
like,
hard, girl. I'm so sorry. Let
yes,
me give you a hug." Yeah,
yeah,
I'm really
yeah.
glad
No
you had that
one,
experience.
I
Yeah.
did not get the at least. Well, the silver lining is, well, just
Ugh,
look at the bright side. Yeah, I didn't get any of that.
no,
They're like, this sucks.
good.
I'm
I,
sorry.
I
Yeah.
can't imagine what you would have said
That,
to them. People just shouldn't say that. We can talk about that later
yeah.
too, but that is
Yeah.
not something you say to somebody going through something traumatic. At
Yes.
least you don't say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, but then you go through that. Takes a while for Briar to arrive in the world, but then she's
Yes.
here,
She's
and then
here.
you have your healthy, happy little girl.
Yes.
And just tell me about the first, let's say, year of her life. What was that like for you as a
Yes.
postpartum mom?
I struggled. I was
Yeah.
not, I've always wanted to have kids. But when I picture like being a mom and starting a family, I don't know. I've always pictured my kids like kindergarten age and they don't come out at that age. So like
Yeah.
that was weird for me where I was like, oh, I'm having a baby.
Yeah.
So I was not the mom that was like immediately bonded and just like
Mm,
had the glow and just felt like intuitively I know what my baby needs. Like that wasn't
mm,
me. There is, and this is, we could talk about preeclampsia and magnesium impacts on your body in a different episode, but I did have I had to come home with that extra medication. I did go through more than I expected to physically in my own body, with all the medication I had to be on in the hospital to be able to safely deliver her with preeclampsia. So I had to do a little more recovery than I was expecting. I think that kind of delayed that bonding feeling. So that didn't come naturally to me, but probably around like 4 months, I kind of shook loose every thought I had about how the world worked and really was like, oh, yeah, there is no rush to get back to a schedule, to get 8 hours of straight sleep, to try and like get her to do these things. It's like all you need to do is sit there with your kid and you just have to love on her. You just have to be with
Mm-hmm.
her. You'd like, I just finally got it that it wasn't, like there wasn't a rush to get back to like achieving. And
Yeah.
that took a long time for me. And it was funny that my boss at the time actually, who's a man and had a really great insight for me, was like, oh, you're at like 4 months, you've hit rock bottom, like you've gone all the way down, because
Bottomed
people
out.
don't yeah, people don't talk about like the fourth trimester is a thing. Like your hormones are crazy, you're starting to get your milk in, you're trying to figure out your new life, like it's crazy. It's just the fourth trimester is, you need 3 months to like figure that whole thing out.
Mm-hmm.
So when I like really hit that rock bottom, I was like, oh gosh, I see the world differently. I see my existence differently, our relationship differently. I like really felt connected to her. So it took me a long time, but then it was just the best. And
Mm-hmm.
like I really loved the first year because I had leave, like I was on maternity leave. I really felt very present with her. I felt like the
Yeah.
first year I was like just really eyes wide open for all of it. And then I will say,
Mm.
you didn't ask, but year two has been like a blink of an eye. Like I don't remember year
Oh,
two. Obviously, there's a lot of trauma that we'll talk about that like I was going through. But year one I loved because I felt so present, and I really loved that like at her first birthday party, people were like, oh, didn't it go so fast, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I really felt
yeah.
like I was really there and really did my best to be able to answer that question when people said, did it go by fast? And I could say no, like, no, I was there. I was present. I
Yeah.
was eyes wide open. I was paying attention. I was with her. And I felt really good about that. So the first year was great. She was great, a super healthy, happy, just smart, curious baby.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the year two just went by in a blink, which is, I don't know how that happens.
Yeah.
Time is weird. Could do an episode on time.
Oh man.
It's
Yeah, I'll
weird.
get a little existential quantum
Yeah.
physics. What is
Yes,
time?
please.
So, okay, so the first year your eyes wide open. I love how you're describing that. Um you're just totally present, enjoying having this baby, and then you breastfed the whole for her first
Yes.
year of life, right? Do you mind just
Yep.
sharing a little bit about that?
Yes, I loved breastfeeding and I
Mm-hmm.
hated pumping, which was a challenge. I work full time, so I went back to work. I had a great maternity coverage, so I did have 6 months of maternity leave, and then I had to go back to work and start pumping. And I did start pumping pre returning to work, but it is just not the same experience. Like it's a very weird experience, and it feels very clinical and like I don't know, just like extracting as opposed to like nursing and
Mm.
supporting and bonding. Like there's no
Oh yeah.
those things aren't happening when you're pumping. And especially when you're like I'm pumping, I'm at my desk doing work, and like it's just the whole just like the whole chemical makeup of like oxytocin is like that's not present when you're just pumping. It's just not the same experience. And so I really had to mentally work through that I really wanted to get to the year mark for breast milk. So it was a combination of breastfeeding and pumping. And I did luckily have an easy time with all of that. It just mentally, like, I just absolutely hated pumping. And so I would have, if I was just nursing, I probably would have tried to go much longer, like 18 months or even like the first 2 years. I loved breastfeeding, but
Mm-hmm.
the balance of the two, I just could not mentally take pumping anymore. So we did make it to her first birthday and then like a little beyond. I kind of got to a place where I'd weaned enough that like I could just nurse her to bed. And I
Mm-hmm.
was carrying just like enough milk for like morning nursing and evening nursing,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't have to like pump. But yeah, basically a year-ish mark.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that about breastfeeding, as somebody who has never had a baby, never breastfed, I didn't think about how it might be so clinical, where I'm like, baby's still getting
Yeah.
breast milk. Baby's still
Yeah.
getting, like, I'm
Yeah.
like, and I know there are a lot of people who pumping and then giving a bottle is like the way that baby can eat. And I know that you and I
Yeah.
both agree that fed is best. I just
Yeah.
I didn't, this is like a light bulb moment for me in terms of like transitioning and like how
Yeah.
laborious and clinical it might feel. And of course,
Yeah.
we're talking about your experience. Other people might have a different experience
Yeah.
around that.
Totally. Yeah.
But I
It's
just
also a lot
appreciate
of work. You got to clean the pump. You got to keep your pump charged. Like it's like
so
there's so much
yeah,
more.
sounds
Yeah.
like a ton of work. So yeah, I can
Yeah.
see where you're like, I gotta get back to work and make
Yeah.
this happen.
Yeah.
So then I did not do this research. Wives' tale or not, once you stop breastfeeding, your period comes back. It's like
Yes.
a type of birth control, right?
Yeah. So
Maybe.
it's not, so you are still fertile. Like there are plenty of people that get pregnant while breastfeeding. So
Okay. Okay.
that is a wives' tale.
Okay.
How long it takes to come back is woman dependent. Again, I did not disclose this, but I too am not a doctor.
Oh yeah.
So
Thank you.
I I would say that for me personally, as we were weaning, I did get my period probably because her birthday is November, and so we were kind of weaning in November. And same ish time period, probably like 2 weeks later, I did get my period.
Okay.
Yeah, but I hadn't, correct, I had not that whole first year while I was breastfeeding.
Okay. So then Briar's a year old, period comes back. What's the conversation about continuing your family planning like?
Yeah. Especially with the fact that I was not like, I love newborns and this is where I
Yeah.
thrive. I've
Mm-hmm.
always had the mindset of like two and out, knock them out, Irish twin style. Like I would have been down if we would have gotten pregnant while I was breastfeeding. I would have been like, works for me. Like I was
Yeah.
just ready to be like, they could be super close in age, no problem. I just, the baby phase is not where I thrive. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just wanted to get that, it sounds bad, but in all honesty, behind me. I really want
Mm-hmm.
to have two kids. I want Briar to have a sibling. I like there's so much that I want to do with my kids, but like the first 3 months is not one of them, but you just have
Mm-hmm.
to. So I
Yeah.
kind of had this like sense of urgency of like, let's get another baby, get this behind us. I know that that's a really hard time for me. And it could be different, who knows, my next experience could totally be different, but
Mm-hmm.
our conversation was like, okay, my period's back, we could conceivably start
Mm-hmm.
trying and see what happens. The other thing is we are very realistic people in knowing like just because we got pregnant with Briar without trying anything does not mean that that would be the story the next time around.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of friends that have shared like, oh, it took us like 2 years between kids to
Right.
get pregnant, like you just
Right.
never know. And so that
Yeah.
was the other thing of like, word to the wise, stop asking people when's the next one, because it's not that easy. And also we were just kind of like, let's start trying now because it could be tomorrow or it could
Mm-hmm.
be 2 years. So we were basically like, your period's back, let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And so you and I are both 35 at the time of recording this podcast. Just out of pure curiosity, was your age a factor in that too? I know that in the
um
US we also like label things geriatric earlier than the rest
yeah.
of the world. So like
Yeah.
I mean I don't mean to be like insensitive with the question, but
No,
was
totally
that
good.
part of it?
It's a fair question. Yes, to me, just because of what I know medically, like you're saying, like when you are, I think it's after your 35th year. So when you are 36, you are, they actually use the term advanced maternal age now.
Oh, thank you.
So
Geriatric
it's
felt
not geriatric pregnancy, but
okay.
my mom had me at 41 and
Mm-hmm.
she was labeled a geriatric pregnancy. And so to me, I kind of oscillate between like, I know the data that like at 36, it's kind of old, air quoted. And then, but I also know like my mom had me at 41, my cousin had her daughter at 41. So
Oh yeah.
it doesn't like freak me out, but I kind of was like
Right.
healthier eggs or younger eggs, the earlier we can get there, the better. I
Totally.
definitely had those mindset as well, but that wasn't exactly driving it. It was more like, I just know that first trimester was tough for me. So I really
Yeah.
want to get it behind me.
Totally. And everybody, everybody goes through it differently, and there's
Yeah.
your mindset, your approach is completely valid. We have
Yeah.
evolved to be able to have babies very close together.
Yeah.
Other mammals haven't, like
Yeah.
great apes, they need 8 years between
Yeah.
their babies, like,
Yeah.
but we can do it. So
Yeah.
it's totally normal and healthy unless your provider tells you otherwise.
Yeah. And I would say that the funny thing is like the longer I am away from that initial 3 month newborn time, the more I'm like, no, that didn't seem so bad. Maybe I would be into it again. And I'm like, no, I'm sure when I get back into it, I'll be like, oh gosh, this again.
Yeah. Yeah, you're getting a little bit of that euphoric recall where you're like,
Oh
oh, maybe
yeah.
it wasn't that bad. I
Yeah. I'm
could
like,
do
no,
it.
I didn't have to go to work. I could just
Yeah.
drink coffee and hang out with my baby.
Oh
No,
yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
that easy, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're having your period, you're not trying to not get pregnant, you're kind of
Right.
taking the same approach that you did with Briar. We're like, well,
Right.
we'll see what happens. This could take a few years.
Yeah.
And what happened?
And yeah, I had one period and I got pregnant.
Yep, there we go. Yeah.
Ta-da. Yeah.
Tell us more. What happened?
Yeah.
So
So
you're pregnant.
I had my one period, I got pregnant. And it was the polar opposite experience of Briar's pregnancy. I
Mm,
was so sick. Like
mm.
every pregnancy symptom you could have, I had: smell aversion, food aversion, nausea, headaches, fatigue, everything you could have. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe
Whew.
it's a boy. Like maybe that's why this is different, is because this is a boy and that was a girl pregnancy.
Uh-huh.
Or I just felt horrible. I found out, I think, like the first week of December, and I was just kind of thankful of like work was kind of slow. Luckily, we just had to kind of get to the holidays. Um, I did feel very like, I don't know, disconnected from it too. Like I just felt like,
Mm,
am I really pregnant? This is crazy. Even the first time you get pregnant is a weird feeling where like you've thought about having a baby for your whole life if you're a kid, someone that wanted to have a family. And when you're
hmm.
really in it, you're like, I can't believe I'm in it. So I kind of was
Yeah.
like, maybe that's what's going on, is I really just can't believe like I'm gonna be a mom of two. Like this is
Hmm.
crazy. And so I did feel very like disconnected from it, on top of the fact that I was just so sick. I actually ended up going to the ER a couple weeks in because I had like rapid heart rate in addition to all of the other symptoms. And so I was like, am I having high blood pressure? Is something going on? Just because of having preeclampsia, I was a little bit more worried about like, is
Yeah.
something happening to
Keep
me?
an eye on it for
Um,
sure.
yeah. And so I did actually have an early ultrasound in the ER where there's no, at that early, I think I was like 4 weeks maybe. But she
Hmm.
was like, you can see like what's beginning and the gestational sac. And like there were some forms of things that are like right on track for that gestational period. So like everything looked fine, but I was just extremely sick. And because we were operating the mindset as we are told, we had told no one. And so my
Mm.
husband owns his own business, and we had a 1 year old, and it was the holidays and we were hosting things, and he took on literally everything. I was like
Mm.
immobile. I mean, I couldn't even enjoy myself and watch a movie. I just had to like stare at the wall because I had so much nausea. And then I
Oh,
did research and I
miserable.
was too afraid to take Zofran because I was like, what if that impacts my baby? And just, I mean, the amount of like mental stress I had of like, I'm not helping my husband. He's bearing all this weight. I'm not spending any time with my daughter. I just felt horrible. And yeah, and again, we didn't tell any family because you're not supposed to tell anyone that you're pregnant until after 12 weeks. So we
Mm.
didn't tell anyone, and it was miserable, absolutely miserable. And it did actually get better when I got out of the first trimester. I finally felt like I was turning a corner, but it was definitely at least 2 full months of feeling really horrific.
Oh, that sounds really hard. I would not wish that on anybody.
No, no,
So
no.
you, but none of those things that you experienced would be red flags where like something's wrong, right? Like I feel
Mm-mm.
like anecdotally, I know a lot of women who are they're like, I just need to get through the first trimester because I'm exhausted and
Yeah.
I feel terrible.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's
then,
super common. They're all super common pregnancy symptoms. And nothing was a red flag. I went to all my regular doctor's appointments. We had our 12-week ultrasound. There's baby, everything's
mhm.
fine. I just felt terrible, and I just was like convinced I must be having a boy because this is like just that's the only thing I could think
So
of is like,
different.
this is just polar opposite experience. And I also was kind of like kicking myself like, wow, I had this great easy first pregnancy. And that's how they get you. They bait and switch you
Yeah,
with these
yeah.
pregnancies.
Oh, that's good. So and then at what point did you announce that you were pregnant? I remember there was an announcement.
Yeah, we did
Mhm.
announce probably we told my family, actually told my family I think at 10 weeks. So we were a little early. But we had told our family early the first time when we were pregnant with Briar too, because it happened on Mother's Day and we're like, well, that seems fun for our
Oh,
moms.
that's
So we had
sweet.
told like immediate
Yeah.
family before the 12-week mark, but again, we were very much like, we're not at 12 weeks. Don't tell anyone
Yeah.
else because the 12 week is the magic week, you know. Um so we had told family and then we actually waited until I think on my birthday is when I told like my friends.
Hmm.
So that way we had definitely hit the 12-week mark. And then I think we even waited a little bit longer, maybe like mid February to announce on like social media.
Okay.
So but it was definitely past the 12-week mark, maybe like 14, 15, maybe even later.
Hmm.
It was before week 18, but I think it was maybe like week 15.
Okay.
So yeah.
For some, I didn't check this before, but for some reason I had it in my mind that it was 16. But
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know why I remember that, and I could
Yeah.
totally be wrong. But for some
Yeah.
reason I thought you were 16 weeks.
Yeah,
Um,
probably. Totally
yeah.
could be.
And you had your cute announcement, and you posted on
Yes.
social media, and we're all so excited for you.
We had
Um,
started moving things around in the house for the
oh, you
nursery.
had, yeah.
We started looking to get a bigger car because my car is not going to accommodate two car seats.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely like other life things were in flight. My work knew we had kind of like already sketched out my maternity leave dates. We had started talking to our nanny family about like, you know, maybe having one of her daughters come be a mother's helper for me during my leave, when we would have another kid starting to go to daycare. So
Yeah,
all these conversations are kind of in flight as well, obviously, as we're trying to plan for our family growth.
yeah. So I know this is when it starts getting tough and sad. What is the first indicator of, oh, something's not okay?
Yeah. It's interesting in retrospect that I didn't trust my gut as much as I should have, could have.
Mm,
Because I did, you know, I mentioned like I felt a little off and disconnected from the pregnancy,
yeah,
which was weird, but I just kind of, you know, shook that off.
right.
I had felt like I wasn't getting bigger, and I started checking photos from Briar's pregnancy to see like what how big was I at this time. And I did just kind of feel like my growth was a little bit slower, which is also fine, normal, could be nothing, but I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of getting a little bit worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the shape felt like it had dropped a little bit as opposed to kind of being like up and a little rounder. Because at this point I'm 18 weeks, and
Okay.
so you know we're nearing midway, and technically you're kind of halfway because you don't really have to go to 40 weeks, right? So like
Right,
I,
right.
I had Briar at 38 in 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to go full term at 40. So 20 really isn't necessarily the halfway mark. So I kind of was like, I feel like I should be bigger. We're like about halfway. And just the shape had looked a little different. And my mother-in-law like definitely meant this endearingly. She was like, "Gosh, you just like don't even look that pregnant. Like you're so tiny." You know, like just a
Mm-hmm.
nice thing, like just a nice thing to say to someone, you know, you think. But in my mind, I was like, someone else has noticed that I'm not
Wow.
growing. Is what
Yeah.
how I like because I was already kind of having some anxiety about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time actually, so this would have been like probably week 10, the first time that we did, or 11, we heard the first heartbeat.
Mm.
I we really struggled to find it, and
Oh, you
so
did.
our doctor had said like, oh, that placenta could be in the front, there could be like we hadn't had an ultrasound yet, we were just doing the Doppler. And so when it took a while to find it, I mean, Taylor and I were very freaked out of something being wrong. And then eventually we got the heartbeat and it was fine. And then we had the ultrasound and everything looked fine. And so week 18 comes along to go to our appointment. And I already was very anxious and I hadn't said anything to Taylor because I thought it was just me. I thought I was just like kind of overanalyzing it. I think I had mentioned to him that I didn't feel like I was getting much bigger, but he was like, "But it's a different pregnancy. It's a different, who
Yeah.
knows?"
Yeah.
And so he heard me, but wasn't worried. And again, nothing
Mm-hmm.
had given us any red flags to begin with. But yeah, our week 18 appointment, we went in and it was not an ultrasound, just regular checkup. We see a midwife, so we don't do regular ultrasounds. We would just do a Doppler heartbeat, and she couldn't find the heartbeat. And then she does, shared with us again, like, we had a hard time finding it the first time. Let's just go ahead and do an ultrasound. And so we did go into a different room to try and see an ultrasound, and that is when we saw a baby. And you can see like a flickering. Normally, if there's a heartbeat, you can see that in the ultrasound. And again, I'm not an ultrasound tech or a doctor, but I could see there's no flicker.
Yeah.
And then usually they can like turn, like toggle on the heartbeat sound. And there was no heartbeat. And she did unfortunately have to have another person come. I mean, it's good. I'm glad two people, came and told us the news. So it wasn't like, "Are you sure?" Like, I wasn't like ever like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "I need to
Yeah.
go and have a second opinion. Like, please wait here." But it
Yeah.
just like, the unfortunate part is like, it's just a long time for Taylor and I to be like, what's going on?
Oh,
And we
yeah.
also, this was one of the only appointments I think that we brought Briar with us. And so Briar's in the room with the ultrasound.
Mm.
And Taylor's like trying to keep her busy. She's, a year and 4 or 5 months. So he's trying to
Yeah.
keep her busy. I'm just like laying down in the ultrasound position, like my world has just stopped and I'm staring at this baby on the monitor that's not moving. And the other doctor came in and verified, and we just then kind of, I don't know. I just feel like I like blacked out. I was unable to do anything.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like, like they hugged us and consoled us. And our midwife is great. And she, was with us for all of Briar's pregnancy. And she was like, "I'm so sorry. This is never news that you want to hear. This is never news I want to tell anyone." And they walked
Mm-hmm.
through our options,
Okay.
because of my, like, what week I'm at, what my options were, that nothing had to be done in this moment, and I had time to think about it. I could decide tomorrow. Gave us all the resources, like who to call next, and when to call, and what we could do, and then things to possibly expect from my body, just in case, because the thing that's interesting about miscarriage is like, it takes time. It's the
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing is your body isn't like, "Oh, no heartbeat, eject." Like, it doesn't happen like that. So like, we also
No.
had to kind of get coached on, like, take your time. Here are the next steps that we would recommend. This is what could happen in the interim. And then after you've processed this, like, this is who you should talk to. And then it's just like, you go home and you just have to go about your day and get your child dinner and then decide how you're going to handle your miscarriage. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, 18 weeks.
Wow. Did you feel, sorry, I want to like take a beat before I ask the next question because that's really heavy.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine being able to absorb that kind of information
Yeah.
and how scary that must have been.
Yeah.
So, oh, yeah, I'm kind of don't have the words, but I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm getting better about saying thank you when people say that, and not it's okay, because it's not okay.
It's not okay. And I also in in my research, I some people really don't like that I'm so sorry, but for me it's a way of saying I see you in this
Mm-hmm.
suffering and I'm with you. And maybe that's just
Yeah.
the words that I should use, but I wish that you and Taylor didn't have to go through this.
Yeah. Me too.
Do you want to keep talking about you get home with Briar? Do you want to talk about that night and the decisions
Yeah.
you're making?
I would say that I don't really remember. I
Yeah,
mean, like, we
it's a
obviously like
lot.
come, yeah, we come home. Um, I do remember a little bit. Get her down, get dinner, all that stuff. She's asleep. Um, and I mean, the second hardest part about finding out is finding out first hardest part is finding out. Second hardest part is telling people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
that part was, I was very lucky. My family all happened to be together in one place. And so I called my family and talked through it with them on speakerphone.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really hard call to have. Because like you
Yeah.
said, it's miscarriage impacts not just the people, the woman, the couple, like my my parents are losing another grandkid,
Yep.
my sisters are losing another niece or nephew. So like that kind of stuff is also like you don't think about it that way, and not in like a trying to add more pressure to the grief that I feel, but other people feel the grief of miscarriage too, as they
Mm-hmm.
should, because life entering the world is so special and important that like it's not
It
just
is.
my loss, like it's a loss to everyone. Someone lost a friend.
Yeah.
um so we had to have that conversation, which honestly was harder than hearing the news myself.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I talked about it, and like even now, I think when I first told you that what had happened, I don't even think I could. I think the first time I told you, I said I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
don't think I could even share.
Right.
This is what I. This is what I was told. I had the
Yeah.
heartbeat thing, and then the ultrasound. Like I couldn't even tell you that story, just like in a clinical explanation of how I was determined to have a miscarriage. And
Yeah.
now that was in March and we're
Mm-hmm.
in November, October. I don't even know where we are. Like now I can talk about it because I've been talking about it. And so it gets easier to share the story. It gets easier to talk through the hardship that it was, and that the grief that I still carry. But that initial conversation with my family was very hard to deliver. And then we mostly just slept on it. We didn't make any decisions. We didn't talk through like what should
Mm-hmm.
we do or not.
Mm-hmm.
My family is a lot of problem solvers, and so they were like trying to kind of triage through, and I was like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, because
Oh.
I think we were going to get to this. So I might be skipping ahead, but
Oh, you're good.
basically at week 18, my options were
Mm-hmm.
um to go into the hospital and deliver because I'm very close to that stillbirth line,
Yeah. Which is
or
20 weeks for as a reminder for people, not to talk over you,
yeah,
but
yeah,
right
20 weeks
there.
is stillbirth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I mean I don't even think I was exactly it could have been 18 weeks in a couple of days. So at that point my options are to go and deliver.
Okay.
So I would get induced as if you were having a baby, and I
Mm-hmm.
would deliver baby and I would deliver placenta in a hospital setting, or I would have a DNC, or sometimes they're called DNE. And that's a medical procedure where they're like basically like cleaning out your uterus and extracting baby and placenta in a medicated way where I'm under general anesthesia. It is a surgical procedure. And then they kind of like clean out your uterus so everything is expelled. Um,
It stands for
and
dilate and do you remember the C? I can
I thought
fact check and share this.
I don't know what C is, but I think it's dilate and evacuate is D and E.
Okay. Okay.
But if someone were to Google the process, sometimes it's considered D and C and sometimes D and E, and I don't know why different places call it
Okay.
different things.
And yours was coded as a DNC?
I think
Or
so.
wait, you're talking through the options. I'm getting ahead of you here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Spoiler.
This is me
Spoiler.
hanging on,
Um,
trying to know medical terms. So
yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to
that's
jump
okay.
in there.
Yeah, but so those are my two options because of how far along I was, and I think that the the two crazy things for me, I guess, in this moment were I had no idea that this is what would happen. I don't know why. When I thought of miscarriage, I thought, I don't know. I thought that things just dissolved. I thought that your body reabsorbed and expressed
Mm,
things. Like I don't know what I was thinking of like when you have a miscarriage, what's the next step?
yeah.
All I think is like, oh, you get pregnant, you have a baby, and you deliver a baby. And then for some reason, I think when you're pregnant and if you have a miscarriage, it just goes, what? I don't know. I don't know what I
Hmm.
thought. So that was the first wild thing to me is I was like, how am I an intelligent, normal human individual woman trying to start a family, and I know nothing about the fact that this could happen to me. So
Mm-hmm.
that was a very weird revelation. And then the second part that really compounded that was again, as someone who's open and willing to share, I talked with my friends about it. Obviously, I was telling the bad news and sharing with people like we had the miscarriage. And I have girlfriends, same boat, same age, starting families. They were like, "What do you mean? What do you mean these are your options? What do you mean that you're going to have surgery?" Like they've also had no idea that
Yeah.
like this is what happens during a miscarriage. And I felt crazy being like, "Well, there is a baby in there just
Mm-hmm.
like a regular pregnancy, and so it therefore has to come out." So that whole it was like a I don't know, it was so mind blowing, and it feels so
Mm-hmm.
simplistic to say it right now, but I just people do not realize that like when your baby dies in the womb, you have to deliver it in some way, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a really hard decision because, like you said, when you have someone that passes away, there's
Mm-hmm.
like normal process of like having a funeral. You have a wake. There's like things that
Yeah.
are like ritual that are
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this made sense. This person is no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing this thing, and this makes us as a community feel like we paid tribute.
Right. Right.
Um, and so for us, we had a really hard time because if you have if you deliver, um, you have the option to see your baby potentially.
Mm.
But I was really worried about having birth trauma and thinking
Yeah.
like, if we want to have another kid, and if I'm delivering a stillborn, am I going to be like way too traumatized to deliver a baby in the future? Like,
Right.
but I also felt like for her, we like I owed it to her. I wanted to like give her like the
Mm-hmm.
um I don't know, like the process of like being brought into the world like as she should have been,
Mm-hmm.
because that felt really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really hard because we are people, and you know this about me, Liz, that like we are people that are very intentional, and we really care
You
about the
are.
choices that we're making. And so
Mm-hmm.
the thought of like not delivering my baby felt so wrong to me that I was really, really leaning toward doing the delivery
Mm-hmm.
and just deciding like it's fine. Maybe I'll just have a scheduled C-section in the future, and maybe I won't ever try to deliver it. This will be the one time I do a delivery. Will just be for her.
Mm-hmm.
So I really intentionally thought like that's the way to go. Um, but the only thing is you have a higher risk of hemorrhaging, and
Mm.
sometimes you have to deliver the placenta as well, and your body is being forced into delivery.
Oof.
And so it doesn't always deliver the placenta, which means you then essentially have to go and have the D and E or D and C, because then they have to get the
Oh.
placenta out. So you could end up in that anyways.
Oh my
And so
God. Yeah.
we ultimately decided, because of the fact that I have a living, breathing, happy, healthy child, we had to make a decision that was for the benefit of my safety and for the benefit of Briar, to make sure that nothing happened to me. And so we ultimately did decide to do the procedure
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to doing the delivery,
Mm-hmm.
which was an extremely hard decision to make.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that sounds really, really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
So
sounds like
that was the next step.
that was
Yeah.
the next step. So
Yeah.
you
And
made,
I would say the other thing that's hard in that is you are I'm calling to schedule my appointment.
whew,
Like,
yeah.
that just is crazy. It's crazy to be like, hi, when can I get on the schedule for my D&E? You know, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's also tough because it is like an ad hoc surgical procedure. And so they have to find an OR. They're kind of at the whim of the hospital for like when ORs are open. So it's not, they have to be like, we'll get back to you. And then they'll tell you like, okay, it's this day and this time. And you're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's in 5 days. And you're like, just, okay, I'll just sit in here with my dead baby. It's like
Yeah.
it's a very weird experience to have to like go in for your, because the day before they do a another ultrasound,
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure, which feels good to know like, okay,
Yeah.
this is still what's happening.
Yeah.
But it's like you have to call and make those appointments. You have to call and say like, oh, this is why I'm calling and this is what I'm dealing with. And like luckily I only had one person that called me from the hospital that was like, hi, how are you doing? And I was like, definitely been better. And she was like,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry I was on autopilot just now. And I was like, that's okay. That's why I
Oh,
was
yeah.
kind of checked you by saying like it's been better.
Yeah.
But most of the time people were like, I'm so sorry to hear this. I'm
Hmm.
so sorry we're scheduling this. Does this work for you? Like it really did have very good care with, and that poor woman was probably like, whoa, she definitely was not afraid to check me.
She was
um,
probably glad that she wasn't just autopiloting, asking
yeah,
grieving parents, "Oh, how are you?"
yeah,
Terrible.
yeah,
In acute grief
yeah,
right now, actually. Thank you.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. It just was like such a weird thing to have to be like, oh, let me just get on and manage this process for myself, you know?
yeah.
So that was a lot. And especially as someone that like has no problem with that normally,
Right.
I just was like struggling. I was like, I have to dial this call and tell another person that I lost my baby. I have to call and tell another stranger over here and tell them because they have to get the ultrasound scheduled before the procedure, before the like I have the pre-surgery call person that's calling me now to verify that I'm not on blood thinners and let them know that I have lost my baby. Like it just was
Mm-hmm.
over and over again, just so hard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the only other thing that we didn't mention in this process is the day after my appointment, so I'd slept on it. We hadn't made any decisions. I honestly, at that point, it was a Friday morning. It was the next day. It was Friday morning, and I was like, "Well, I gotta tell my work. Like, what now?
Mm-hmm.
What And so we had told immediate family and close friends. So I at least had like said it out loud
Mm-hmm.
before. But Friday, I work from home, I come up into my home office and immediately tell my boss. And he was like so shocked and upset with me.
Yeah.
And he was like, please go talk to HR right now. Please do not come to work today. I don't care when you come back to work. Like, please just take whatever time we need. Just go. HR will help you. Don't talk to anyone else today. Please get offline. And so the next call, well, my poor HR person couldn't meet with me for an hour. So I laid in bed and cried for an hour. And then I got on
Mm-hmm.
the call and I was hoping I'd be like cried out by that point, which I was not. And my HR lady was like, take the time that you need, take
Mm-hmm.
6 weeks. I'll send you the paperwork that you need. Do not worry about this. Whatever you need, just please take it. Take care of yourself. And I literally logged offline and that was it. I had to like go and have all these, health professional calls of like, I need to schedule my DNC. Um, so that, but like that gave me the space to be like, hey, work is done. Like I just turned that switch off. Like it's not even in any thought of my mind. And then I just had to go into like, how do I go forward with this process? So there's a lot of stages with it. Like there's the first stage of
Mm-hmm.
finding out that you have a miscarriage, and it's crazy that you have to be told. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll talk about differences in miscarriage, but in this case, I had to be told. My body didn't know. I wasn't showing signs of it externally. So
Mm-hmm.
you find out, then you have the period of like, what do I do and what's the next step and that
Mm-hmm.
decision process. And then when you decide, then you have that decision and the procedure and that healing process. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
your whole other situation of grief. Um, but yeah, I just was lucky that I had someone that was like, go take 6 weeks off. And then I also was thankful that I had nice people when I was trying to schedule these things. But you have to, like, the amount of work I had to do to schedule, call back, arrange times. When could I come to this appointment or that? It's a lot of work when you're just emotionally at your lowest point you've ever been.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just one thing I want our listeners to be aware of, you were in Washington State at the time. Sitting here today, we were both in Washington State. And this part where Shannon is having to pick up the phone and get some care to ensure that she's able to deliver her dead baby, this is where the Dobbs decision is causing women in states not like the one that we're in to not be able to get care. And I just want to point that out from an access to care perspective. Like you're hearing how incredibly challenging this was for Shannon, for something that was she had her two options because she was 18 weeks along. I can't imagine being afraid of like, oh, is there going to be something criminal happening to me because I can't just have this tissue inside of me. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
mention that.
And I would say too that it is something that I did not know. And my doula gave me a resource that prepared me for this as I was researching like delivering versus
Mm-hmm.
DNC. Because I basically I reached out to my doula and said, I'm not Googling this. I don't need images.
Yeah,
I want to know
no,
anything.
no, no,
And
no.
and she said, here's a resource that's very good, and I can provide it in
Oh
show
yeah,
notes for everyone.
that'd
But
be
I
helpful.
was reading through that, and in that is where I learned that my care for what's happening to me um, is going to be coded medically as an abortion. And that was something that
Mm-hmm.
I was not aware of. I figured there were different words for different things. I, in my
Yeah,
mind, thought I knew what the definition of abortion was, and I thought that mine was like I'm what you're saying. I'm having
right,
tissue removed because I don't have a living baby,
right.
and so that was something that I again was not aware of. The care that I was receiving for the fact that I do not have a living baby in my body anymore at 18 weeks is classified in medical terminology. It's very limiting language because they are different scenarios. But it's my any of my paperwork would say it's an abortion.
And I'm really glad that your doula provided that to you and that you were able to so gently receive that information because I'm just imagining if you're going through this sort of trauma, you're in this grief, and then you're looking at something and it's coded with abortion, you're like, wait, there's nothing elective about this situation.
Yeah,
I wanted to deliver a baby and
right.
this pregnancy spontaneously ended at no fault of
Yeah,
my own. What are you
right.
talking about?
Yeah,
And like you, I think I appreciate that you use the word limiting because this is not like a binary transactional situation. And um, my heart goes out to all the women who are dealing with what has to be so incredibly painful. I'm imagining after the procedure, during the procedure, there was a lot of pain, but then just the emotional turmoil on top of like criminality. It's like
mm-hmm.
that's not
Yeah,
something I want people to have to deal with when they're going through something that is just so painful to experience.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I would say like because providers aren't worried about that, they can take better care of me.
Yes.
I had
Yes.
such great care. Everyone like in the hospital in the procedure, like even the woman at the operating area check-in was like so kind about what was going on. Like you see it coded, you know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so I just everyone was very kind to me. And but they because they could be, you know, because they know that like this is what has to happen for what's happening to me medically.
Right. They didn't need
And
to be
so,
fearful of
right, they
themselves
could
being
just
involved in
yeah.
something. They could be there for you. And I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to talk over
Yeah.
you.
No, no, the
Just to
things
be
that
like,
you're
yes, they're able to give
yes,
you
you
the care that you deserved
yes, you're
with
definitely amplifying exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
do you want to take a little break now and then come back and talk about next steps? What happened?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks, Shannon. We are back from our break and we're talking with Shannon about how at 18 weeks pregnant, she received the very tragic news that her baby no longer had a heartbeat and she and her husband had decisions to make. There was a lot of communicating that needed to happen, and that ultimately they decided to go with the DNC procedure to extract the tissue from her body in order to make the best decision for their family. So Shannon, take us to that day, the day of the procedure. What do you have in place? What's your expectation? Just tell us about what that was like for you.
Yeah, we luckily have close family.
Mm-hmm.
So basically my family's goal was like just do not let her be alone at all.
Mm-hmm.
And not in like a way of they were concerned of my harm or like me harming myself, like not like that kind of like don't let her be alone, but just like she should have someone there. She should have a shoulder to cry on. She should have someone to try and force feed her something to eat. Like
Yeah.
just do not leave her alone was kind of their mentality. So we actually had my husband is going to have the day of my procedure off and be with me. And then again, he owns his own business, so flexible as far as like if he needed to come home. But the plan was really to like have my family with me during the day, and he was kind of with me in the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, another topic for another time is your partner's grief in all of this because this is my
Yeah.
story, but Taylor has a very parallel story of
Mm-hmm.
how he handled everything.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, we had the procedures outpatient, so it was in the morning, out in the afternoon. Um, it you do have physical impact. You're getting your uterus cleaned out essentially. So there is a lot of cramping, you're still bleeding. So I'm wearing diapers.
Mm.
I am lucky in my mind, I'm lucky because I didn't have milk come in, but women can have their milk come in as if you
Oh,
had delivered a baby. And so that's a whole different area of
yeah.
like needing to handle that and how do you not get engorged and but don't pump it so then you're creating the cycle of milk. So I did not have to deal with that, very thankfully. That was one of my
I'm
biggest worries,
glad.
is I thought that that would be like such a mental burden, and I don't know, I would just be like even more deeply in grief if I was still managing that part of it. Since I loved
Mm-hmm.
breastfeeding so much, I was just so worried about that. So I didn't have to
Totally.
deal with that. It is also a very different feeling. It's a weird thing to explain, to say the weirdest feeling in the world is having a dead baby in your body. Like that is weird. That is weird to know
Mm.
that like the whole point is you're giving life. Like you're pregnant to deliver a baby. That's the whole
Mm-hmm.
end goal. And so to have a dead baby inside you is a very weird feeling. But it you almost, because I waited a week between finding out and having my procedure because of scheduling and how all of that works. And my body could have spontaneously decided to start delivering it, which then I would have had to go to an ER and be handled within an ER environment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had to wait the week for the procedure. But then at that point, you're like, it's as like as close as I'll ever be to her. So even
Mm.
though you're like, it's weird that you're not alive inside of me, you also aren't exactly in a place where you're ready to be like, okay, let's not ever have her again. So
Yeah.
that was really a weird, just such a weird thing to think that like you're ready to get this out because you're like, this isn't healthy, this isn't good, like tissues breaking down, that's it's a a medical worry.
Yeah.
But you're also just like not ready to let go because you're only halfway. You're still thinking like, I still have the rest of my pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So that just threw me for a loop more than I expected it to. And then you transition right into like the most empty, hollow feeling because it's just removed. So
Right.
that was also a very weird feeling. So you are in some aspects, you still have very similar postpartum experiences. Your hormones are changing. Some people get their milk. You're still bleeding as if you had, had a delivery. So that is kind of like the physical part. And then you get to meet grief and become best friends with grief
Yeah.
because you've lost your child. And I think the hardest thing too is we didn't tell anyone the first trimester, and we needed so much help because I was so sick.
Mm-hmm.
And then we tell everyone and have to share the bad news at 18 weeks, and we
Mm-hmm.
have all the help we could ever ask for. I mean,
Mm.
we had like flowers coming out of our ears. We had someone here every day to help me because everyone wanted me to just rest, to help with Briar. We had DoorDash gift cards. We had food coming. I mean, just like showered
Yeah.
in love. And I was like, what a difference that would have made to the first trimester. Like, had we been open of like, hey, I'm in my first trimester and I'm really sick right now. We could really use a hand. Like, that would have made the first trimester amazing because Taylor
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have had like this huge burden. And then I'm here with this loss and we have
Mm-hmm.
all the help in the world. And I remember feeling so angry about it at the time
Mm-hmm.
because I was just thinking like, what a bad way to tell women and families like, oh well, don't tell anyone early because
Mm-hmm.
you might have to tell them bad news. and
Mm-hmm.
and then they can all be there for you when you're having bad news. But like, God forbid we're just there with each other when things are just a little bit hard. Like I like really could have
Mm-hmm.
used
Right.
all of that support in the first trimester. And I remember being so surprised by the anger that I felt about having so much help and so much love during that time when like we could have used it a different time. So
Yeah.
that was also a really surprising experience for me, that I was almost mad, and I kind of got to a point where I was like, "Can everyone go home? Like, I don't want
Yeah.
anyone here. I'm just mad."
Yeah. And that's okay. Anger is absolutely a part of grief, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that you allowed yourself to feel angry. In my research, because of exactly what you're talking about, we tell families, we tell women, don't talk about a pregnancy until you're out of the first trimester. And so in some of the, stories I'm reading, it's like, well, so the call is not, I'm having a baby, I'm pregnant. It's, so I just had a miscarriage. And people are like, we didn't know you were pregnant. And so
Yeah.
then you have to go through all of that. And so I guess I'm just trying to highlight that, everybody should do what feels right to them, but that doesn't seem really in service of families receiving care like you got. And I see why you were angry. You were like,
Yeah.
I was flat out unable to participate in daily living during my first trimester, but I wasn't telling people.
Yeah.
And now everybody's here. I could have been getting this kind of care.
Right.
I can see why you'd
Yeah.
have
And
that feeling.
it was no one's fault, but I just was like, where were you then? Where were you then?
Oh yeah.
It's like they were at their houses because I didn't tell them because I'm not supposed to tell them, you
Right.
know?
Right. And I'm definitely hearing that you were not mad at anybody. What I'm
No.
hearing is this frustration of why why did I just do what was suggested of me, which
Yeah.
was just don't tell people, and
Yeah.
I clearly have community that would have come around me and helped me
Yeah.
out. I just was thinking I was doing what I thought was the right thing because that's what
Yeah.
society tells me I should do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that was a really weird experience right after it happened. Between just feeling like so hollow and empty. Like I can't explain it other than hollow. You're just like, I
Mhm.
used to share a body with this baby and now I don't.
Mhm.
That part, the physical healing, and then just obviously like grief all over the place. But yeah, I just remember just the vivid feeling of being so angry, of being just like so flooded with love, and it just felt like the wrong time to be flooded with love. I was like, gosh,
Mhm.
where could this have been if we not and it wouldn't have changed the course of the experience, but like just gosh, how much we could have used community at a different time.
Mhm.
Um and I'm very thankful that where they everyone, just completely surrounded us in love. I was like beyond words shocked at how much love people poured all over us. But yeah, just it was a weird
Mhm.
feeling of being like, wow, this would have been so nice months ago when I was so sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
then,
oh, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna say, and then kind of from there, I did take 6 weeks of leave. I took bereavement, and medical leave, for 6 weeks.
Okay. Um, I definitely want to talk more about that. I do have a couple
Yeah.
other questions that you can
Yeah.
answer as you want, or you could say I don't feel like talking about them.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to know, and I think our listeners might benefit from knowing, in the spirit of being good community members, friends, sisters, brothers, moms, dads, was there anything particularly helpful or supportive that you're like, this person met me right where I was at, that maybe people could do if they know somebody that's going through a miscarriage? Like anything particularly helpful or supportive?
Um, just let people be sad. Like
Let
that
people
is
be
the
sad.
biggest, yes, the biggest thing is like I knew people who I felt comfortable with being sad around,
Yeah.
or could text them and say like this today is really hard. This is what's really hard about it. And having them just like listen. Um, or people that I felt comfortable being like they could be in the room with me and just sit there and not have to like let's distract her or let's do something else, or like they could just be like showing up and saying are we sitting today, are we staring at the wall, is that the agenda, because
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. Knowing those people and knowing I had those people, those are the ones I turned to the most. I will say the tough part about that is most of those people are the way they are because they too have experienced grief.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is harder when someone luckily hasn't had the depths of grief that out of order loss brings. There's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a sadness with losing a family member, a grandparent, like all those things are very sad. But like the deep, like absolutely horrific, empty, raw feeling that grief brings you, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think they come from other things. And so I know friends that have lost parents, had
Yeah.
other out of order losses. And those are the people that I really feel like I could turn to on the days that I was just really sad. Um,
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, the biggest thing is just like, do not say at least. Do not, you don't have to,
Mm-mm.
don't couch anything and just let them be sad. Like it's just sad. And the more you can lean in to the sadness and the more you can like let someone cry or let someone talk about the part that was hard or let them do nothing but stare at the wall and just be there, like
Mm-hmm.
that is how you help with grief. It's not pushing through it. It's not distracting. It's not like that's why it was so critical to not go back to work. Because it's not and you shared that in the intro, like
Mm-hmm.
it's not distracting. You have to give grief the attention that it needs.
Mm-hmm.
I did hear a quote that grief is unexpressed love.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
like you have a lot of that if you never got to meet the baby. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say. I never thought I like needed food, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say the food helps. It is very nice to be like, oh, thank God I don't have to like think about anything because my mental
Yeah.
capacity was just not in a place where I was like meal planning or thinking about something. And especially if you
Yeah.
know a family that has a loss with like a toddler, that was the biggest thing is I was like, oh God, do we have any fresh fruit in the house for
Yeah.
Briar? Like I could barely take care of myself,
Totally.
let
Yeah.
alone like making sure I'm making good choices for my daughter. So definitely like the food helps. It's it's nice. I got like very, very kind care packages. Um, like those things are all very nice gestures and like they're great to do. Don't not do them. But really the most impactful thing was like just people that would let me be sad. Just
Yes.
it's sad. That's
It's
it.
it is sad. It's sad, it's painful, it's unexpected grief that you
Yeah.
wouldn't wish on anybody and you're living
Yeah.
through it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's I think that would be the biggest thing. I mean, I got this blanket as a gift and I'm very thankful for the blanket,
Oh, I love that
but
blanket.
like it's
Yeah.
very nice. There are very like soothing things. There are like I got a weighted eye mask from someone. Like they're like
Mm,
very, very intentional, great gifts, but like you just have to let people cry and it is so uncomfortable. It totally is. Like even I mean I'm
mm-hmm.
cry talking through this whole podcast episode, but like I still see people cry and I'm like, oh gosh, like this is really rough. But like that, you have to do that. It's the human experience. Like there is no sadness alone. Sadness and happiness are the same side of one coin. And
That's right.
so we're not ever going to be in a place where none of us experience grief. Like the more you help and experience and you're with someone that's going through it, the better you can help the next person, or the more
Mm-hmm.
prepared you can be when it hits you because we're all getting it at some point, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's so true. And like in the intro, the I think it was from the American Psychological Association article where it's like we live in a culture that almost I don't know if it was the word stigmatized, but it's like don't be
Yeah.
sad, don't cry.
Yeah.
And it's like that's part of what I hope to do with this podcast to say no, be sad, cry,
Yes.
express yourself. All the science is showing us that that's the best thing we can do for ourselves is to sit with
Yes.
those feelings. And so if you have a friend who is permitting themselves to cry and to be through that, cheer them on. I mean, maybe not cheer
Mhm.
them on. Sorry, and also not trying to be funny, but just be like let it like this
Yeah.
sucks. This sucks. I'm
Yes.
so like maybe not saying I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but like I'm you feel the way that you do. This is so valid.
Yeah.
And
It's
just supporting them in their
yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say that is absolutely the biggest thing is to just you have to be sad. You
Mm-hmm.
just do.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, which this is something that until I had you, a friend, have a miscarriage that was open about, I didn't even think about, okay, what do we do with the tissue? And we don't have
Oh,
funerals for babies. We don't have
yeah.
obituaries for babies. That doesn't exist in our culture. I would be very curious if other cultures do anything around this or if,
Yeah.
people in the past used to do this in cultural groups, but what did you and your family decide to do? And is there anything you're planning on doing from like a ritual perspective for keeping Lily's memory alive in your family?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I'm glad you asked. We did actually decide to have her cremated,
Mm-hmm.
which is a whole other emotional burden of a choice because, again, it's calling around for funeral homes, pricing it, asking what happens when what's the process? What do I have to get you? When do we meet? Um, when do we have to go sign paperwork to authorize you to cremate our dead child? Like, it is a whole other thing. So
Wow.
I
Oh
understand
my
why
God.
people may just say, like, I'm at the procedure, I'm done. Or if people do choose like the delivery route, maybe there's something else that they want to do. But
Mm-hmm,
it is a
mm-hmm.
whole other host of stuff that you have to manage during your grief. Which similarly, like planning a funeral, doing all like just when you lose anyone, like it's a lot of stuff that you're managing when you're in deep sadness.
Right.
And I will say though, the hospital people and the funeral home people were some of the most comforting people to be around because they're so used to talking to sad people that I was like, oh, this is relaxing. Like I can be very
Yeah.
sad in front of you, and you are used to people being very sad in front of you all the time.
Right.
Like it was
Yeah.
very, I was kind of like, can I hang here for a minute? Because like you guys get me. Like you let me just
Yes.
cry. But it was that is we chose the cremation route. Um, we again are very intentional people. This is our baby. This is our child. Um, you are in a body. You are a soul. Like we just there was I don't know. I never actually thought of anything different. I don't think we were ever like not going to. I don't know. I just assumed that
Mm-hmm.
like we would do something for her.
Yeah.
I will say we didn't talk about this and I'll just mention it quickly. We are a family that does not find out gender, so we did not know her gender, which actually was another part of the decision of DNC versus delivery, was because to deliver, I would most likely be able to find out her gender. But DNC is a more aggressive procedure, and so you don't
Uh-huh.
always get to be able to see everything,
Oh,
and you
okay.
could not see
Yeah.
it on an ultrasound, and we had declined to get it during the genetic testing, which by the way came back completely fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was also that other milestone for us is we were able to our doctor called the genetic testing people and they had masked it on our results, but they did have it. So getting the call to say your daughter, she was a girl is what I think they just said. She was consistent with girl or something. Like it came back
Yes.
very medical, but I just
Yes.
like that was another milestone of deep grief of like, oh, you are even more of a person to me. Now I know my daughter lost a sister. Like that stuff was very hard to process as well, which would be different for people that knew along the way what their baby's gender was. But yeah,
I'm
when
glad
we
you
found
said
out,
that. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't
yeah.
mean to interrupt you. But yeah,
Oh
that
no,
a lot of other people would have found that out early. So you're like, how
yeah.
do I navigate this because we want to honor her,
Yes,
or if it was a
yes,
him, honor him,
yes,
but we want to
yes,
talk about this baby and
yeah.
give this baby a name aligned
Yes,
with their gender.
we wanted to name her. And so we were like, how do we do that? We were like, do we just do like a gender neutral name? But then we luckily were able to find out the gender. We
Mm-hmm.
were able to name her. And then we did decide to do cremation. And then we actually that's kind of where it stopped. We were very aligned on like, of course, we're getting her cremated. Um, but then after that, we hadn't decided like, well, now what?
What do
We
we
never
do?
wanted
Mm-hmm.
her to. We were never like we're going to like do a vase inside or something. We were going to do something with the ashes. We just didn't know what. And I distinctly remember a conversation where someone had mentioned like the jewelry where you can put like ashes into a ring or a necklace.
Yeah.
And I felt so strongly against it. And I remember telling this person, um, that it's not your job as a parent is to keep your kid. Like
Mm,
I'm not the keeper of my child. Like my goal is to show my children the world, to, get them out there I'm kind of chaperoning them through that, but then like they will be on their own as adults and carrying on. And so like there's no part of me that would have ever kept my child. Like that felt so wrong. So I knew things I didn't want to do with the ashes, but I didn't really know what we wanted to do with them. We talked about like we always go to the coast, and that's a very special place for our family. So that, and we every New Year's we go to the coast, and that's a family tradition. So we thought like, oh, well,
mm-hmm.
we'd be visiting her every New Year's Eve. And then we talked about like planting a tree on our property for her or something.
Mm-hmm.
So like we had some different ideas. And one day, we had family over, of course, helping. And Taylor and I were sitting out in our garden, and Taylor was like, why don't we just put them in the garden bed? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Like, and I kind of like the
Yeah.
idea of like the bed. It's a bed. I kind of like the idea of like growing, like she's in the soil and its nutrients, and she kind of comes back and has flowers every
Yeah.
year. And we named her Lily. It was spring when we lost her, and so
Mm-hmm.
almost every bouquet of flowers had lilies in it. The first bouquet that
Yeah.
we got when I opened the door the day after I had shared the news was like all lilies. And I had liked
Wow.
Lily as a name before, and so we actually did put her ashes in a garden bed. We planted the bed full of lilies and gladiolas, which are the birth flower for August.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did just kind of sat there and shared a moment with her. And now that's just kind of we just call it Lily's bed. And that's just kind of her
Mm-hmm.
spot.
I love I love that you did that. It's so appropriate for your family who, for those that don't know, the Starks have like a little farm on their property, essentially. It's just a bunch of flowers and just a real garden, which is why I mentioned that Shannon loves gardening at the beginning because she truly does. She spends a bunch of time out there. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing how you
Yeah, I'm glad
decided
you
to.
asked, because that was something that was really important and really helpful in our grieving process, and just like giving some ritual to it. That's not a standard
Mm-hmm.
ritual, and people don't know what to do. And really, I would say like you need to do what feels right for you. Like there were certain things that were very clear to us of what we wanted to do, and then there were parts that were unclear of like, yeah, but what do we do with the ashes? We had the ashes in our kitchen for a long time, and I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
want her right here with us, not hiding these ashes away. We're not putting them somewhere where we can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
Like people would come over, and I would be like, yeah, this is Lily's right here. Or
Mm-hmm.
we'd talk and share stuff and be like, like I hope Lily thought that would be funny. Like we just like
Oh,
included
Lily.
her for a
Yeah.
while, and then it was like, okay, it makes sense for her to kind of be close enough.
Mm-hmm.
But we would never we're never going to hang on to her in that way.
Mm-hmm. And you took your time and you decided what was right for you. And some other family might want to go the jewelry route. And one thing I know about you is you're like, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I just
Right.
strongly know how I think and feel. And um yeah, that just makes perfect sense for your family culture.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned that you took 6 weeks of leave. Do you mind just describing what that part of your postpartum miscarriage journey was like, and what you did with the time? Feels like a kind of a dumb question, but like
Yeah.
your company, and is that company policy too, would be another question I would have, like six
You
weeks
know,
bereavement
I don't
for.
know if it's
Okay.
company policy. Someone said 6 weeks in like that first conversation with HR, and I just was like, okay. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
had
you
to
were like,
again,
what policy is that in
yeah,
reference to? You're like, okay,
yeah,
thank you, let me get out of
yeah.
here.
And I
Yeah.
just was like, I basically was like, could you give me a date? And so they gave me the date that was 6 weeks from then.
Okay.
And would say like we just kind of expected this date. And I was like, I need dates for paperwork. So I wasn't like calculating through and thinking like, okay, this is 6 weeks. Um, and no one said anything else. No one said any
Mm-hmm.
different. Like I put the date in the doctor's paperwork, and they're like, okay, signature, And so I
Mm-hmm.
I never thought twice about it. Um, I do think that technically part of it was medical leave because of having a surgical procedure, which may be
Mm-hmm.
treated differently had I done the delivery route. Maybe that would have been
Mm-hmm.
different. But I know that at least the first 2 weeks were considered medical, and then the
Mm-hmm.
other four I think were considered bereavement. But all encompassed, all of the time that I took off was under FMLA.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how it kind of worked on paper for me. I again was just in the throes of deep grief, and so I literally asked my HR person like, can you highlight what fields you need me to fill out? Like
Mm-hmm.
I can do almost nothing right now, so like
Yeah.
give me the limited amount I need to do. So that's luckily I have very kind people helping me.
Mm-hmm.
As far as how I use my time, I did my best to just feel each day. So
Mm.
like some days I was doing nothing. Like I might zone out and watch Friends the entire
Mm-hmm.
day because I needed like sound in the background, but there was nothing I could do. Like I physically could not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Until 3 o'clock, in which I would pick up my daughter, and then she was an extreme ray of sunshine for us, which
Yeah.
like, like there is a fair amount of distraction that is helpful in grief, I'll admit. But it was like I would have the whole day to do nothing but sob. And
Mm-hmm.
then it was like, okay, pick yourself up a little bit. You get to spend time with your daughter, and that, like felt like a good balance. Um, so yeah, it depended on the day. Some days I would do yard work because it was very mindless and I could just
Mm-hmm.
pull weeds. I could move my body and just let my mind wander. I listened to music and just whatever. So like that was helpful because I was moving. I didn't have to think. When I got to a place where I could think a little bit more, I actually found cooking and baking to be really helpful because it required me to think in a very like low bar situation, meaning
Mm-hmm.
like half a cup, measure half a cup, because the level of disconnect that I had in my brain, I've never experienced. Like, in the intro, you said like we have our MBA, we have undergraduate degrees,
Yeah.
where I'm a very type A high achiever. Like,
Yeah.
I've never in my life experienced a place where it was like, God forbid I try and follow directions. Like, it was like, this feels like a really, low bar of entry to try and just follow a recipe. And that eased me back in. And then I was like, unfortunately, baking daily. And I was like, what do I do with this? I don't even want it. I was like trying to follow a recipe. So yeah, yard work was really good. Um, Baking and cooking was really good. And then just getting outside. I would just sit outside. I
Mm.
mean, if nothing else, I would just get outside and sit. Luckily, it was spring, but that was nice to do. And then one week of it actually coincided with our childcare needing a week off. So I did have a week that was with my daughter, and we
Mm-hmm.
did like little field trips each day, um, which is good because the thing that happens is you hit your pregnancy milestones while you're going through your
Yeah,
grief. So I would
they
like
do.
I would run into like a calendar notification that I had forgotten to delete, and it would be like 20-week ultrasound or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then I would be like, due date. And I was like, great, that's great, just great. So
Ooh.
that's tough because it's not, and it is similar to losing anyone. It's like you hit their first birthday after they're gone, the first holidays
Mm-hmm.
after they're gone. Like, so similarly to
Yeah.
any loss, you do run into those, but there are a lot of pregnancy milestones. So when you were like going in for, you're like, oh, it's this week we're at a lemon or this week or whatever. And so you just run into those that's really tough. But yeah, I just really tried to like decide like, okay, could I do one thing today? And if I can, what is it? And then if I can't, okay. So I just cried a lot. And I cried in ways I've never heard myself cry. Like
Mm-hmm.
deep primal crying that I was like,
Yeah.
I'm making this sound. I've never heard this sound. So you just have to give your body and mind and soul space to just go through that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did get a really good book in a care package from a friend. And it was called It's Not Okay. And it was a really good
Mm-hmm.
book. And I loved that book. And that was kind of it. That was 6 weeks can go by pretty fast when you have a lot to cry about.
Yeah. Well, I'm, as your friend, I'm grateful that you permitted yourself that. And in my experience with different kinds of grief, I feel like the more you avoid it, the more it's just waiting for you some other
Yeah.
time. And so for you to just take that time to sit with it, like you said,
Hmm.
get to know it, make those crying sounds where you're like, excuse me, that was me. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like depths of
Yeah.
your soul. I'm so I wish that you didn't have to have that experience, but I'm really glad that you were able to do that for
Yeah. Well, and the
yourself.
other thing that was really critical about doing that is we want a kid. We want to have a second
Yeah.
child. And so like the thought of just pushing through and then getting pregnant again
Hmm.
and then what? Then I'm just carrying this extreme grief that I'm hiding from everyone, and then I'm expected to like be happy about this pregnant. Like there's no way you could manage all of that together. I mean, you just the thought of keeping it and trying this again is just there's literally no way. I knew I had to be so close with it and just experience it because I had to get to a place where I could be alongside of it to
Mm-hmm.
move together with it through my life because
Mm-hmm.
I will be pregnant again and I will
Mm-hmm.
have to face this. So
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't any stuffing it somewhere.
Yeah. Well, on that note, well, let's do a little choose your own adventure. Should I share my research on family leave and people's protections, or would you like to go into the next part of your story? Either way works for me.
I'm open for both. I could be quick on the next part of my story. It's shorter.
Let's do that. Let's
Okay.
keep people have heard from a lot from me today. So let's keep going on the Shannon Stark story.
Yeah.
So so you take the 6 weeks, you're processing it, you return to work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's
Yeah.
going on with your
So
body?
so my body handled it well.
Mm-hmm.
I did go back to the gym after 6 weeks. And again, the other hard thing no one tells you about is entering places where you were last pregnant. The crazy thing is like pregnancy, you don't hide, like, especially in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bump, and then the next time I come to the gym, I don't have a bump, and having to navigate like the questions and the conversations. And obviously, I go to a women's gym, so thank God it's a very comfortable place to be. But just
Mm-hmm.
entering rooms that I was last pregnant in was a very hard thing also to experience that I didn't expect. Um, that was a weird one. But yeah, 6 weeks go by. My body kind of stabilizes. I get my period back once, and then I get pregnant again.
Yeah. And how did that register with you? Were you ready for that?
I think no pregnancy will ever get to be the naive, enjoyable one that was Briar's. I just will never experience that again after
Mm-hmm.
having Lily's pregnancy and Lily's loss. Like they're just no, no everyone is like, well, when would you be ready? Like what not in like a pushing way, but just like when would you be ready to have a kid? Never. The answer is never. After you have a miscarriage, especially at 18 weeks, there's no lifetime in which I'm ready to do this again.
Mm-hmm.
But there are just things that like you have to go through if you want the outcome. And so it was shocking. It was laughable in a way because like here we are again, like we are just like we have one period and then get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt really sad. It felt really happy. It felt like a good balance of like we just had this tremendous loss. Now we have this tremendous excitement. Um, but in the interest of keeping the story short, I will say we did lose that one as well. So
Mm-hmm.
we lost that baby at 7.5 weeks. And we do call this baby number three because it was too early.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that felt really different about that miscarriage is I had physical signs. So I had
You did. Okay.
I did start to bleed, and I was again like, is it because I had just had a D&C? I'm not fully healed from it. Maybe that's what's happening. Blah blah blah. I'm trying to kind of coach myself through it. This might not be a miscarriage, but I ended up bleeding for a month, so
Mm.
July 1st through August 1st. I did have one day of like actual
Wow.
like contractions, where it was like every 3 minutes, for 30 seconds, and which was on my third wedding anniversary, which was not ideal.
Oh.
So like they're just that one, I had an easier time coming to terms with it because I felt very connected to my body in the process of this miscarriage. So my body is giving me signs, my body is communicating to me, we've lost this baby, we're going to, you know, release this baby. It did take a very long time, which is normal. Unfortunately, that is a process that like your body does shed it slowly over time.
Mm-hmm.
But that I felt much more connected to the experience of miscarriage. And so it felt more manageable, I guess, emotionally, as opposed to going to an appointment, being told this information and not experiencing it within myself and then having it
Yeah.
taken from me through a clinical fashion, which again was our choice. We chose that route, but
Right.
that felt extremely different to be 18 weeks having a surgical procedure and having that end versus being 7.5 weeks getting signs from my body, processing a miscarriage, naturally, that felt easier because I was just more connected to it. So that's the back-to-back miscarriages in a year. And the other thing that people don't think about that I've had to say out loud
Mm-hmm.
many times is I've done the first trimester twice in the last year, and the first trimester is extremely challenging. You're exhausted,
Right.
you have fatigue, you have the luckily that this pregnancy I wasn't really having like the major sickness I was with Lily. But just after that miscarriage, so in August of this year, the just level of physical depletion that I felt between nutrients, hormones, like just my body physically being depleted, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, like just the sheer depletion in every way possible, having two back-to-back miscarriages. And you mentioned it in the beginning of this. I'm not considered recurrent miscarriage. You have to have three back-to-back to be
Mm.
considered recurrent. And the amount I have gone through in under a year, to think about doing that a third time before getting different care is insane.
Yeah. And I know that there's a lot of women that do that, and that just makes me really sad. I wish that the system had a way of giving people access to care sooner so that you didn't have to 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 do that. And I hope that one day we'll
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's the second part that we're just coming back from.
Well, thank you for sharing. You still want to have, you want to still complete your family, which means another baby. Um, I know that you have your family to, we're recording this on a Sunday and she has her family to get back to. Do you want to just share a bit about what you are now doing? So what I witnessed as your friend was, okay, baby number 3 has miscarried, and now I'm gonna do the Shannon Stark thing, and I need to figure like what's the plan here. And
Mm-hmm.
would you just mind telling our listeners what that has looked like for you and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, I would say that generally when you do hit the recurring miscarriage category, I think this is generally what would be prescribed to you, like additional testing, hormone testing, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not someone that can sit passenger in my story and just say, sure, let me just try it one more time. I, as many women are told after my first miscarriage, I was told it's unlikely to happen again. You're both healthy, your daughter's healthy, just go try again. Like that was, and that's why we weren't trying to have baby number 3 like right away, but we thought like, well, everyone said there's no problem if we do, so we'll just
Right.
if it happens.
Yeah.
But now having done 3 sets of different blood work at different times of my cycle and kind of just trying to get a baseline of where we are, my progesterone is extremely low, and my naturopathy went as far as to say like she would almost guarantee that is why we lost baby number 3, is because
Mm.
after Lily's miscarriage, my hormones just probably never got back to where they were supposed to be. So basically, I'm kind of in this wellness window where the goal is to try and impact the quality of my eggs, the quality of my husband's sperm in the like next 3 months. So not these
Mm-hmm.
immediate eggs, but the ones that will come in like in the next 3 cycles, which is a whole
Mm-hmm.
other area that I was like, I didn't even know exactly how eggs worked, how the cycle works. I just all this
Right.
is the amount that we don't know until we're in an
In it.
issue is crazy. So
Totally.
I could get on that soapbox for a very long time, but I basically am taking a lot of supplements. I am taking additional hormones that are bioidentical to the hormones that I need from my blood work. Going to acupuncture, chiropractic, and massage. I am trying to work out at least 3 days a week and walking all other days of the week. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to avoid caffeine, which is a sad one,
Woo.
and then limit alcohol and sugar. Having a very protein focused diet. I think that's all of it, but really, like the whole
A
goal is
lot.
like the next kind of 90-day window is to see what we can do to kind of impact all of those things positively. And then I'm doing kind of recurring blood work, and the next one will be probably in 2 months to see how those hormones are looking. Because if I were to get pregnant now, there's no way that my hormone levels would sustain a pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would be we'll be looking at and monitoring what that looks like. So best case scenario, we're doing the best things that we can to have a healthy pregnancy. Worst case scenario, we're just really healthy people at the end of this,
Yeah.
because there is no guarantee. That's why babies are the miracle of life, because even with all
Mm-hmm.
this, it does not mean that we will be guaranteed a healthy pregnancy.
Well, I admire you for all the lifestyle changes that both you and Taylor are making. It's like embodiment of hope, just taking the
Yeah.
next right step in the faith that you're doing what you can to have that healthy baby in your arms, hopefully
Hmm.
soon, but in the right
Yeah.
time for you and your body.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about hope. Like people talk about it's like a fluffy cloud word. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, Hope has dirt on her shins.
Yes, she
She's
does.
crawling back for more. Like
She's got a
you
little
just you
blood on her
can't
face. Yep. Mm-hmm.
yeah, you can't give up. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're taking an active posture, knowing that that's, the best we can do.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And in the interest of time, I think what I would like to do is ask you the three final questions that every
Yeah.
guest gets, and then you can hop off if you would like. And then for our listeners, I'll go through what I've learned about family leave and protections in
Yeah.
the United States. That works for you?
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds
All
great.
right. Thank you so much. So, number one, Shannon, if you could go back to earlier this year after each of your miscarriages or lilies, whichever one you want to talk about, what would you say to that younger version of yourself?
I think I would probably say it's gonna get a lot harder
Mm,
first. Um, I know that I talked about it, but really like the level of communicating I had to do and facilitating, and like it's not like you're hit with this bad news and you're gonna take this 6 weeks of leave and so you can just decompress. It was like
mm-hmm.
I still had quite a bit of uphill to get to, okay, procedure started kind of the recovery period. And so I think I would either say to myself, just hang on, it's going to get harder. Or I would probably say this is where you meet grief. I've
Mm-hmm.
been very, very lucky to like, I mean, have had grandparents pass away or like older people, in my life that are like that kind of in order loss.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously very sad, but not like the deep, deep grief that I've felt now. Um, so I might have maybe like tried to prepare myself to say like, just so you know, grief's at the door. So get
Yeah.
ready to open it and you're gonna have to sit together. Because I've never cried the way I've cried. I've never felt the depletion that I've felt. So all of that, I think I wasn't there's not in a mental space to be like, oh, okay, next I'm going to start grieving. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I maybe would have a warning if I could have maybe warned myself, I would have maybe said that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Second question. What has been the most helpful tool or resource in navigating your miscarriages?
Um, this is a peripheral to your question. It it's not okay. It was a really great grief book, which I really needed. So I would say
Okay.
that resource was really helpful.
Okay.
And then I would say I read It Starts with the Egg,
Mm-hmm.
and I that is the only resource that has felt um like positive to me. Everyone is like you were saying, oh, geriatric age, oh, age is so impactful to egg health and sperm health and it like everything feels like, oh, if you want to have a kid in your mid 30s, you're kind of out of luck, good luck with that. And yes, there are challenges, there are reasons, there's oxidation, there whatever. I get it, but there are things that are first of all being studied more now that more people are talking about having families later in life. So thankfully there are more studies about how you can impact egg quality. And it just was the first book that empowered me to have conversations about like my blood work, the supplements I'm taking, what is actually happening with my diet and how that's impacting my egg health. So it again just was empowering. It helped me
Mm-hmm.
have conversations with my doctors. So that has been like my Bible. It helped me kind of like fine tune supplements we're taking. There's a cookbook. So that resource really felt empowering to me as someone that takes charge in their life, where I felt like I wasn't just like at the whim of statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like trying again felt possible. So that
Mm.
would be kind of my resource.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure that It's Not Okay and It Starts with the Egg is findable in, at minimum, our Instagram account,
Okay.
Uniquely Qualified Pod. Okay, so final question for you. If you could say anything to someone out there who is relating to your story, what would you say to them?
Talk to someone.
Mm,
And
yeah.
no one needs to get on every podcast and start screaming about miscarriage. Like, I know that that's not everyone. And even since sharing our first loss with Lily, I am the one that's like reposting pregnancy last month, and we're
Mm-hmm.
recording during pregnancy last month, so it is
We are.
like
Yeah.
great timing. But I know that everyone is not a soapbox person. I learn something or find out about something, and then I'm like, give me the soapbox, I'm getting on it. And that's not
Mm-hmm.
everyone. So when I say tell someone, I don't mean find your friend with a podcast and get interviewed. I mean, like, find the close person, that if it's your mom, but like it has to be someone outside of your partner, because they're also
Mm,
going through it. And Taylor's story is his own story, and he has his own grief story, and he definitely went through grief,
yeah.
but like telling my girlfriends, having them ask questions about my experience, sharing with them because they could run into it, like, it just was so important for me to talk about it, and it just relieved me of so much by sharing it. So I would say, like, just whoever you have in your life that you feel comfortable with, sharing it. I have become now the token miscarriage story person, which is fine. I was at
Mm.
a baby shower last weekend, and a friend's mom told me about their miscarriage. I was at Thanksgiving 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, and I had someone, share a miscarriage story. It's like they're everywhere, but people
Yeah.
don't feel like they can share them, and they don't feel like they can go to someone with them. And
Mm-hmm.
so just either be the person that you have friends that can come to you, or
Mm-hmm.
just share it with someone. It just, that has been the best thing for my grieving, is to know I'm not alone. We didn't talk about this, but when I did share it on social media, I had no less than 100 DMs from women. And
Yeah.
I'm not like I'm not a person on social media. I'm not influencer of any kind. The number of stories, the number of people thanking me for sharing my story, the number of people that were like, I was too brave. You're so much braver than me. I could never say this out loud. There were
Mm.
so many women that are quiet about it, and it's so harmful in their healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just say, please talk. You can talk to me if you want to find me on Instagram, DM me. I'm fine with that. I just do not want people acting like it's their burden. I don't want anyone to feel shame around it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your fault. These things happen, and I just think that you have to talk to someone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so helpful. And thank you for being on the podcast. I will let you go if so you can get to Sweet Briar and Taylor.
Yes.
And I think I will pause right now, but listeners, when we come back from the break, I have information that I think is really important for all of us to know about in terms of some primary research that I did, as well as in the United States, facts and figures around FMLA and state protections for bereavement leave. So stay tuned. We are back from our break, and Shannon has gone to enjoy her Sunday afternoon with her family. But I did compile a bit of research, as I mentioned, that I really wanted to impart on listeners. So Shannon had mentioned that she got 6 weeks of leave, and that sounds incredibly supportive. And I wish I had a magic wand and I could enable people to have that kind of resource themselves. I do want to remind people I'm not a human resources professional, but I really do encourage listeners, if you or someone you love is navigating a situation where you need any form of bereavement care, take a look at what your state and local governments provide. But I'd like to thank a couple of my friends and podcast supporters right now. My friend Kiana in, I don't know, I'm acting like I don't know how to say your name, Kiana. She lives in San Diego, California, and then my friend Mika, who is in Stuttgart, Germany. And both of these women reached out to me and shared helpful information, um, just regarding some government support the families receive around reproductive loss. And so, for the purpose of today's episode, we're just going to talk about what that looks like in the United States. In the future, I would love to research and discuss what other governments have in place for their citizens experiencing reproductive loss. So if anybody wants to come on and share about their non-United States international experience, I'd love to have you and discuss. But in the United States, we have something that a lot of people are familiar with. Shannon mentioned it, but the acronym is FMLA. FMLA is part of the United States Department of Labor's Family Medical Leave Act. And the FMLA states that eligible workers have the right to take 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave to care for various health conditions, including stillbirth and miscarriage. There are other additional requirements too that are company specific. So I'd say look into that if you're needing additional support. But a big issue right now is that people appear to not be taking the time that they're entitled to. I came across this article by a company called Fast Company, and people appear to not be using their benefit because they don't know it exists. Earlier this year, in partnership with the bereavement advocacy nonprofit Evermore, in her site, also another nonprofit, surveyed more than 1,300 people on the FMLA, specifically about whether they knew that leave for miscarriage and stillbirth, which allots time for companies to rest, recover, and grieve their loss, is protected by law. So they surveyed 1,300 people. 77% of respondents said they didn't know about the protection. And 91% of people who've had a miscarriage or stillbirth said they took 0 days off from work to recover. And this is a quote from In Her Sight's co-founder and CEO, Ursula Mead. She said, "I think it's concerning that people who have lost a pregnancy would be physically recovering and emotionally processing while still at work, all because they don't know they have the right to put themselves first. My main takeaway from this data is that we all need to do a better job of understanding our rights before we need to use them. Otherwise, we risk not realizing we had rights at all, or our managers risk putting direct reports in uncomfortable and disempowered positions." So I hope that lands with you all, and not only for people who might be experiencing it, but if you're a people leader or a manager in a company in the United States, it might be helpful to brush up, get in touch with what your company's policy is, as well as what your local and state government provides, which is my transition now to, again, thanking Kiana, because she brought to my attention something that's happening in the state of California right now. The Fair Employment and Housing Act, acronym FEHA, enforced by the Civil Rights Department, protects the right of most California employees to take up to 5 days of leave from work after reproductive loss. And a reproductive loss is not just miscarriage, but it includes miscarriage and stillbirth, failed adoption, for example, if a birth mother or legal guardian breaches or dissolves an adoption agreement, or if an adoption is not finalized for another reason, failed surrogacy, unsuccessful assisted reproduction, which could be a failed intrauterine insemination or embryo transfer. So, as I learned about this 2024 Reproductive Loss Amendment, I discovered that there is an organization called the Institute of Reproductive Grief Care. It is based in San Diego, California, but it offers support and services globally to people who are experiencing grief around reproductive loss. Its website is reproductivegrief.org. And because I was really digging into the data that the website presented, I learned that there are also specific cities that offer grief and bereavement care. 2 of them are Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the other one, I was shocked to learn, is Portland, Oregon. These 2 cities have offered expanded leave care since 2021. And part of why I'm like pausing on the Portland, Oregon of it all is I live in the Portland metropolitan area, and I worked downtown in Portland from 2017 to 2023. So I would have been protected from 2021, 2022, 2023. I thankfully had no need for this, but I had no idea. And I generally try to be a pretty informed person, but this whole episode has let me see how unaware I have been around these topics, as well as protections that we all are entitled to. So another state wherein you have additional protections, it's the state of Illinois. And in 2023, Illinois enacted the Family Bereavement Leave Act, which expanded the rights of employees in grief to take up to 2 weeks or 10 working days. It expands time leave requirements to cover pregnancy loss, failed adoptions or surrogacy agreements, unsuccessful reproductive procedures, and other diagnosis or events negatively impacting pregnancy or fertility. The FBLA also requires employers to provide leave time after the loss of family members that were not covered by the Child Bereavement Leave Act. So not just the individual who might be experiencing this, but their spouses, domestic partners, siblings, grandparents, and step-parents, which, as Shannon mentioned, her family was impacted because they were also excited for the birth of that child. So I guess I really wanted to bring this forward because this is a trending topic in legislatures and in governments. The California amendment that was passed through in a Senate bill signed by Governor Newsom in 2023. But again, I'm just really encouraging people, before you need this, even if you think you would never need it, take a little bit of time to Google and research and understand what you may or may not be entitled to. I like, obviously I could do an entire episode on this, but now I like to transition to the primary research that I did. So that was all secondary research that I conducted from different government websites, nonprofit organization websites. But as I was digging into the research for this episode, I was seeing a lot of numbers with a pretty wide range for the incidence rate of miscarriage. So I know at the beginning of the episode, I said keep 1 in 4 in mind. 1 in 4 confirmed clinical pregnancies ending in miscarriage. But I wanted to reach out to my Instagram following, and like Shannon said, she's not an Instagram influencer. I most certainly am not. The people that follow me, I perceive to be people, and I say perceive to be because I think this is how they have all come to be my followers. They're my friends, they're my family members, they're people that I've actually known. They're not typically just strangers on the internet. But I reached out and I said, hey, have you or your partner experienced miscarriage or pregnancy loss? And I just followed the standard polling that Instagram has available in stories. So it's 24 hours that it was live. And I had a little over 50 people that replied to the poll. Folks, I was taken aback. It helped me prepare for this episode in imparting me empathy, like a new level of empathy, because 63% of the respondents said no, they or their partner had not personally miscarried or had a pregnancy loss. But 37% of the people who responded to my poll said yes. And first of all, I guess I want to thank people for taking the time to respond. I especially thank the people who responded yes and trusted me with that medical information about you. I also just want to say that there were a lot of people who said, I have not had a miscarriage, but I know lots of people who have. Thank you so much for bringing this into our conversation. So I want to acknowledge that people, men and women, I was also surprised by the number of men that leaned in, said, I'm aware of this, but this is not something that we discuss. And so I just really wanted to, again, thank people. It highlighted for me a few things. One, that this is not just a women's issue, that this is something that we need to talk about more. And that the more that we in general can be open about our experiences, the more that people don't feel like they have to suffer alone. And in order to receive the support that they need to heal, move forward, and build a life that looks best for them. I just, again, want to thank everybody for participating in that poll. Again, the numbers were 63% said no, but 37% said yes. So if you were one of those 37, I hope that today you felt connected with Shannon's story and that you felt like whatever your experience was, that it mattered. I want to thank Shannon Stark for being on the show. I also would like to thank Taylor Stark for taking care of their daughter and doing some daddy-daughter time on the Sunday afternoon while we were recording. I want to thank our listeners who have stayed with us on this pretty long episode, but thank you so much for your support. We are going to have links and supporting documentation included in show notes and on the Instagram. Our Instagram handle is Uniquely Qualified Pod, and you will see the week that we have Shannon's episode air, we will have stories that relate to miscarriage, grief, pregnancy loss, and we'll also share some pictures of Shannon and her family. As we discussed today, sharing in a safe space can be a helpful part of the healing process. And so, if you or someone you know would like to share their miscarriage story on Uniquely Qualified with me, please feel free to contact me either by direct message on the show's Instagram or by emailing uniquelyqualifiedpod@gmail.com. I would be honored to amplify your voice and to share space and listen to your story. Thank you all for tuning in. And please remember, each one of us is uniquely qualified. Thank you.